Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the TPSE Math invited lecture. TPSE is Transforming Post-Secondary Education in Mathematics. It is my fine pleasure to introduce Joan Ferrini-Mundy, President of the University of Maine and Vice Chancellor for Research and Innovation for the University of Maine System. Joan, we're also proud, Joan is a TPSE Math board member. Now I'll tell you some of her background. Joan has served as a director of the Mathematical Sciences Education Board at the National Academy of Sciences. In 2007, she joined the NSF as the director of the new Division of Research on Learning in Formal and Informal Settings in the Directorate for Education and Human Resources. In 2011, Joan became the assistant director at the NSF's Directorate for Education and Human Resources. The list keeps going on. In 2014, she was elected to the executive committee of the Association for Women in Math. In 2017, she was appointed the chief operating officer of the National Science Foundation. 1 year later, she left the NSF to become the 21st president of the University of Maine. This past October, President Biden appointed Joan to serve on the prestigious National Science Board, the governing body of the NSF. As one of 24 board members, Joan will serve as an independent advisor to the President and Congress on national science and engineering policies and programs. Today, Joan will speak on learning, teaching, and doing mathematics in the era of AI, new challenges and opportunities. She will give her address, and then we'll have Q&A, after, plenty of time for Q&A after the address. Joan, please.
Okay, it's good to see you all. Thanks for coming out so early, and thanks for being here to talk together about AI and mathematics and how the world is changing just so very rapidly. So let me say a couple of things. First of all, I'm going to talk about the teaching, the learning, and the doing of mathematics in an AI era from the perspective of my own experience and my own current role. So I have to put a pretty big disclaimer here. In no way am I an expert in AI. And there are experts in AI in this room, and I know that, so I hope you will be patient and follow along if you like with my journey over the last several weeks in doing what university presidents need to do quite a lot, I think, which is learn enough about something to be able to help to make some good decisions on your campus and to be able to support and advise your faculty and your students and your staff. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm definitely an interested observer. I dabble. I need this knowledge for my job, and I wanted to be able to offer a point of view that comes from what it takes to try to gain some information in a fairly short period of time, but I feel a strong need to keep up. I have a few very knowledgeable colleagues that I've called upon to help me think about this talk, and their names are here, and they'll come up in the talk as I go through the slides. So I have come to realize that this business of AI is so multifaceted that it really does take multiple kinds of expertise. So the first and probably very obvious point, and a lot of these points might be very obvious to you, is that this AI moment is pivotal. It's an example of the world around us changing relative to this domain and all of its dimensions at a speed we haven't seen before. So look at the steep slope on the graph on the left of the uptake of generative AI tools at about 40% of the population in the US, having used it in just the brief time since its commercial release, compared to the much more gradual uptake of the internet, which took 5 years to get to the same use level, and personal computers, which after 9 years haven't reached this level. About 70% of companies I found have adopted, at least in some business function, have adopted the use of AI. How many in the room have used AI in the last week knowingly, like intentionally? And probably everybody's used it in one way or another without even thinking they were. So it's there, it's out there, it's big, it's a big deal, and no better time when we have a kind of a wave like this that's washing over all of us to think about how the mathematics and mathematics education communities can actually help. And so that's a little bit of my theme here. And I know that people are in different places in terms of how they feel about AI and what it may do for their work and for their lives. But at the same time, if you are in universities, if you're in companies, you have leaders who are, in a sense, looking to folks who will be the experts, who will help to guide what happens next. And I think it's a great place for mathematics to have a key role. So in preparing, as I mentioned, I looked around a lot to see what was available nearby. I will make the slides available. And one slide that I picked from a presentation called Artificial Intelligence in Maine, done by a graduate student who is in the university's Department of Economics, actually. But her interest in her research area is in how AI is changing the labor market in Maine right now. She's studying that question. So you can just imagine studies like that going on all around. And she took a look at the Web of Science and at the actual areas of research that were showing up, and noticed the change from 2011, where 3,000 or so had AI as some kind of a component, up to 2022, where we're now at 44,000. And different language showing up, new fields of study, new areas of inquiry. It's a very rapidly changing area, and it is quite either tangential or, depending on how you work and what you do, it's intersecting with mathematics and mathematics education. So something around us changing at a pace that we've not really seen before. My basic talk goes in these three parts. AI is changing how mathematics is done or can be done. AI is changing the way mathematics is taught and learned or could be taught and learned. And then really focus toward the end with discussion with you all on how university leaders, and I include chairs and deans and provosts and presidents and others who are in responsible roles where people are going to expect you to have some answers on this, or have some opinion, or have some point of view. And let's talk about how you can help those folks if you choose to, because I think that's a very good place for mathematics to be, in a position of showing expertise and being able to make a difference beyond the teaching that goes on. So first of all, to talk about changing how mathematics is done, and I have drawn very, very heavily on the work of and presentations of Terence Tao. He has been a leader in publicizing and popularizing in many ways how to think about and talk about AI in mathematics and in mathematical work. And here are just two of the YouTube videos that I watched with great interest. And if you haven't heard him speak about the topic, it's worth taking some time to do it because it's just amazing. His insights are just amazing. So he gave a beautiful talk to the 2024 IMO competitors about AI and mathematics, and he also recently gave an interview with these folks from leaders at OpenAI on the impact of OpenAI 03, its new release, which is a new release designed to devote additional deliberation time when addressing questions that require step-by-step reasoning. So again, I have only very thin knowledge, but great admiration for the ways in which this mathematician and so many others are helping all of us to understand what this could mean going forward. Tao talks about AI as the mathematician's co-pilot. This concept of an actual co-worker, a colleague. In the education literature, there's similar language. Co-pilot, co-teaching, hybrid teaching, where the hybrid is the human teacher and the AI assistant. So this is a way of thinking about the world of work quite generally in a new way, and Tao has been pioneering this discussion. In the IMO talk, he gives a lovely history of the use of machines in mathematical work, and talks about the four-color problem, the use of proof assistants, and then goes on to describe Lean, which is a proof assistant. And I'm just curious, how many are familiar with Lean? I was not. So several are, so okay, good to know. And I feel like I have just a bit of a sense of what this tool is. It's software that can basically formalize proofs for abstract mathematics because of the library on which it draws. And so Tao spends some time speaking about the importance of this tool in being able to produce human-readable, interactive proofs based on the formalizations, but then translated into forms that are more accessible to a wider audience. And I was intrigued by the interactive proof idea. So you imagine this tool, and you know it, many of you know it, so I'm on thin ice trying to even talk about it, but imagine this tool where you're able to dig in more and more deeply as you wish to understand what might be behind any claim or piece of a claim all the way through the proof, and understand what's behind that in a more formal way. That's a very incredible tool. You can imagine it, of course, in doing mathematical research. You can also imagine it in teaching sophomores in high school about mathematics. And it's that kind of span for these tools that is quite intriguing to me. Tao also talks about the fact that we have different ways of doing mathematics that just don't exist right now. And so those of you who know and use this tool, perhaps you're encountering this, but for those of us who are thinking about the education of our K through 12 students, our undergraduates, our graduate students, if they're going to be very new and different ways of doing mathematics, what's our job in helping prepare the people who will be able to do mathematics in that way? And so that to me is quite intriguing. In the OpenAI interview that Tao did, he talks about the power of the tools, and you've heard about this, but for me it was eye-opening, really. You could scan hundreds or thousands of problems, he says, at once, and do really different types of mathematics. So the scale with which we can do mathematics is opening in very new ways, and these tools just keep improving. Another point that Tao tends to make in several of his talks, and this is again part of his IMO presentation is here, but he makes this point about collaborating with many, many people. You can collaborate with hundreds of people that you've never met before, and you don't need to trust them. And that's not meant in a disparaging way. That's meant to say, if they try to do some piece of an elaborate, comprehensive proof that requires a big team, then Lean will check it. And so even if their knowledge isn't adequate, Lean will help and figure it out with them, and then you can engage many, many people. I read his point to be math becomes much more inclusive. And this is at the level of research mathematics, of course, but can you imagine pulling that back into undergraduate mathematics? How do we make our field more inclusive? How can we imagine posing problems, maybe problems that don't even start out looking like mathematics problems, but where mathematics students can play their part in finding some piece of a solution that contributes to something much bigger or much broader? So again, I'm very intrigued, and I imagine the mathematics community in universities is or will be, with this notion of democratizing mathematics, of opening this up so that people can become expert in areas, but learn how to collaborate with and read and understand the work of others. And I found that quite intriguing. Another article that I have drawn on is this one, What is the Future of AI in Mathematics? This comes from Epic AI, and it's an interview with Tao, with Timothy Gowers and Richard Borchards, and an IMO expert, Evan Chen. And so this goes, it's quite wide-ranging, and much of what Tao has said in other places shows up here. But another piece of this that intrigued me in thinking about, again, being a university administrator who's trying to understand enough about the disciplines in your institution to support them well. This article talks, in Gowers' words, about experimental mathematics, which is now possible in broader ways, wider ways, and across many more domains. And he says your computer becomes the test tube, and you sort of stick the problem in the test tube and shake it around and see what comes out. A very different kind of experimentation and way of working with mathematics, and of course, there are examples and ideas about how this can work. Again, thinking back to the preparation of our students and our graduate students, what might this mean as we look at a mathematics that could become a very different kind of practice as time goes on? New waves of prize competitions and opportunities. We're very familiar with prizes in the mathematics community, but this is the Artificial Intelligence Mathematical Olympiad Prize that has been launched. Wide open, and you can imagine the solutions coming from anywhere, of course. And what's intriguing about this, I think, is the notion that it is designed to create a publicly shared AI model that can win a gold medal in the IMO. So there's a lot of this, how good are the models? How good are the tools? Can they do mathematics better than mathematicians? Can they do mathematics as well as competitors in the IMO? And that's becoming an actual area of activity. So some have said, as I've read across these articles, some are saying, well, what does that mean for mathematics? Will mathematics become completely automated in these ways? And at least Tao is very reassuring and said there's just always more. There's always more we can look at and do that humans need to help conceptualize and think about. But this one is kind of intriguing. And imagine the interdisciplinary knowledge that would be needed, likely, to solve this prize problem. This isn't just mathematics that someone would need to know, but a whole lot of the different dimensions of AI would be really important, it would seem, to this work. So we have this kind of phenomenon around us, and our students are likely way ahead of certainly where I am and where many of us are likely sitting, because they are watching and doing and finding things that are intriguing and fun to do. OpenAI's release of O3, which is an advance in what OpenAI's tools have done, of course, is a huge piece of the news in this business, and I learned that as I prepared for this. And one of the interesting things I learned is about what's called a benchmark. It's for tracking AI progress in mathematics, and frontier math is a set of problems that have been developed by groups of mathematicians. Maybe somebody here worked on them by chance, who would know a whole lot more about this than I do. In any case, these problems are unsolved, or difficult to solve, I guess. Difficult to solve, new and unpublished. And so they have been created in collaboration with over 60 mathematicians. Full spectrum of modern mathematics is included. And the idea is to feed these problems to these AI tools to see how well they can do. And apparently, from the data that we're seeing here, up until now, previous AIs have only been able to do about 2% of these problems, and the new O3 can get up to 26.3 of the problems, so percent of being able to solve them. So we've got tools that are doing this problem solving. I'm not advocating for them in any particular way. I'm simply saying if they're out there and they're this accessible, we then, as mathematicians and mathematics educators and administrators, I feel need to understand that this is a new world, and how do we play in it, and what do we do for our students and for the learners in this world. Oops. So to summarize this portion of the talk then, I've concluded here from what I've been able to see and the folks I've talked to, AI is certainly changing how mathematics is done. In lots of ways. We can do more mathematics more rapidly. Now, this is from the perspective of research mathematicians, but I think it has implications for what might happen at other levels, and it's worth thinking about that, and the implications for learning, particularly at young levels. It's an opportunity to engage large groups of people with very diverse expertise, maybe with more specialized expertise in some key areas. It can be used for brainstorming new approaches, new ideas, to ask it questions, to give it a chance to sort of see what it might come up with. Expanding the types of problems that can be addressed. So problems that have been intractable, perhaps these tools will now are opening up new ways to solve them. The notion of an inspiration for new types of textbooks and interactions. We've always talked about, not always, for many years we've talked about interactive textbooks and ways to help students go to a place in a textbook and then move to other places, or to help teachers have surrounding information in those textbooks to understand the mathematics and where it's headed and so forth. This brings this to a whole new level, the potentials for not only interactive, and I'll speak more about this in a minute, but personalized, completely personalized learning tools. Mathematics as an experimental science, how intriguing. And then getting hints about what might work, how to approach trying out several ideas and seeing what the tools will tell us. So again, this piece, I mostly wanted to get enough of a sense of what it is to be able to think then about the pieces that are more immediate for me in my day-to-day work. But I'm intrigued by what's happening in mathematics with this, and do hope to figure out a way to keep up. And that's going to be one of my queries to you all, is how do those of you who are in the field, working in the field, how do you help those of us who want to be supporters and contributors in the ways that we can from our jobs as chairs or deans or whatever we are? How can you help us help you have the tools you need, have the resources you need to do really exciting things with this from within the mathematics community? Not necessarily all of these approaches, but there's a rich set here of what we might consider to do going forward. So, questions about the preparation of future mathematicians and users of mathematics, professors and teachers. What are we doing now? I'm going to shift now to the comment that I began with, which is about AI changing the way mathematics is learned and taught. and how to think about that, at least from the perspective that I have in reviewing what I've been able to review. And it really does remind me of the early calculator days as a math teacher. But in those days, it was mostly mathematics teachers who worried about this new technology. It wasn't the English teachers or the history professors or any number of other people, but this is everybody, folks. This is out there in the world, everybody trying to grapple, everybody being affected in one way or another, whether they know it or not. Over the holidays, our kids were together, and our daughter-in-law is a high school art teacher in a small town in New Hampshire. And she was talking to it. We were all talking about AI, and really we didn't know very much about it. But Sarah said, she said, my students in my ceramics class, now picture a ceramics class, right? That's pretty hands-on. She said, they are saying to me things like, my AI is going to do the basics for me here. And I guess what that means is the AI gives the concepts, or I don't even know what that means. She was outraged. She said, we will do this with our actual hands, and we will not use AI. But I point out that it's not something we're controlling at all. This is what's there, and kids are doing whatever they do. So as I began to think about this part of the talk, I talked to a colleague at my university who's become quite well known in our system. So we're one of 7 universities in a system. He's the finance vice president for the whole system, okay? About pretty far away from mathematics. In fact, he's been exploring these areas, and he wrote me a text the other day. He said, if my high school math teacher from Farmington, Maine could see me now learning all this math to try to understand AI enough to talk to me about this talk, he'd be appalled. But anyway, so my colleague Ryan Lowe, who's a vice chancellor whose whole day job is doing the finances for the whole system, got interested in the topic of this talk for me before I had really explored very much. And so he asked me a little bit about it, and then he made a prompt, which you can see there, sort of, where he decided he'd see what Gemini Deep Research could do with this, a new tool, newish tool, that will take some topic and research it in a sense of trying to find out what's out there, what there is about it that can be used and can be helpful, and then generate a report. And he said, I sent the prompt in, and it's that prompt, which, again, I'll share these if people want them. He said, I sent it in, I went out for coffee. When I got back, there was this beautiful report, and here you see it. And the title was chosen by Gemini. And the report is, on a first cursory read, it's pretty passable. It has like 35 references. It's really quite interesting. Now, it's not been really possible to use the report for this talk exactly. I've had to read and learn a whole lot more, but I just share with you what someone who has no domain knowledge, particularly in this area, but who's become our expert in our system in how to use these tools, offered. And he was kind of interested, and he kept sending me these texts with different things that he found. And it's an interesting set of connections that's possible. I have a little bit from the report. So this table was produced by the report, and if you can see it, it's particular pieces of software, particular tools, their features and their audiences, and these kinds of things are easy to find, and you can just sort of ask ChatGPT probably. But what you see in the discussions about the tools relative to learning are not surprising results, right? Discussion about detailed explanations of solutions that can really be quite user-friendly in ways that are not necessarily always the case. Step-by-step solutions where you can, if the steps are going by too quickly, you can dive in more deeply and see more. Adaptive learning resources, very, very interesting. That's the beginning of personalization. That's based on what the tool knows about the user and what the tool knows about users in general on whatever that topic may be in terms of whatever it's learning from, and then adapting what gets put in front of the learner to be able to help them make sense of some concept or work on some problem. The interactive problem sets, again, wide open, interesting category of, it's curriculum development, it's instructional design, it's mathematics, it requires AI, it's a variety of disciplinary areas coming together. Gamification. I've always had colleagues I've had colleagues over the years, you all have too, who've said, if we could just capture how transfixing games are for adolescents and teenagers and college students for the purpose of having them learn mathematics, just think how far we could get. And there's been some of that, but this brings it to whole new levels. And then finally, augmented and virtual reality possibilities. So we have, those of us who were in the calculus reform era, we talked about the rule of 3 and different kinds of representations that were formulas, and tables and graphs and so forth. Think about what gets opened up now, when there can be full-blown immersive environments for looking at and understanding mathematics concepts, and those become possible for students. And so Christian Hammond speaks about something that he calls precision teaching. So we've got precision medicine. Precision teaching based on tracking what a student knows and needs to know, and then designing for the teacher guidelines for how to help that student. Again, very new and different possibilities for what might be coming. So here on Khan Academy, because that has been so widely known for so long, and Khanmigo, their AI tool, we see a little bit of language from their annual report, which says that individual learners are at different skill levels. Khanmigo can offer personalized guidance. One teacher is tasked with delivering personalized guidance to many students, and this tool can provide immediate feedback of that type. It's AI-powered tutoring. And there was a piece that I found in this, publication called Education Next, I guess, where a student, an 8th grade student, who's using both Khan Academy and Khanmigo. And she concludes, Migo is like a teacher. Okay, so we're back here, folks, to this co-pilot idea, the hybrid role, the teacher and the tool kind of together. Khanmigo is like a teacher. And the problem sets, regular problem sets, are like homework. So obviously you learn more from the teacher, but occasionally the teacher can ramble on. And I don't know if that's denigrating to the Khanmigo teacher or to the human teacher, but anyway, homework is fine, but a decent tool with its own perks, even if you might be learning less and the quality is lower. That's her critique of the homework sets, as I read this in Khan problem sets. But this Khanmigo, if you haven't played with this, that's one I think probably to look at, and getting wide use apparently. So here's where I began to look around my campus and think about, well, who are the experts? And first problem was I didn't know who they were. I had to do a little bit of checking around. But the first of my colleagues that I found is Justin Dimmel, who is a researcher in our School of Education. His fields are essentially the development of learning environments. His lab is called the Immersive Mathematics in Rendered Environments Lab, and he works in a number of different areas. One of his tools is called Handwaver, which I think is a clever name. It's basically, and I'll just read his description, a gesture-based virtual mathematical making environment where learners at all levels can use their hands to act on mathematical figures directly without mediating their intuitions through equations, keyboards, or mouse movements. So I actually saw a sample of this with in the VR setting, which is the headphones and you really are able to take the curve or take the graph and move things around directly with your hands as a gesture. And the point is to allow learners to make, modify, measure, and explore mathematical objects in a virtual three-dimensional space. And they developed it, quote, to increase access to meaningful mathematical experiences for all learners. So we open up the range of representations, essentially, that can be accessible and available. Now, this is at the research level. This is a cognitive scientist working on tools that may become useful in learning and constant iterative development. But I asked him about AI and its role in this work, and he said, well, it's still early from his perspective as a mathematics education researcher in this field. He feels that coding will help us to transform how digital environments can be developed. I presume meaning it can be faster and more effective when the AI will build the code that builds these tools. The notion of AI-enhanced interfaces like transcriptions, you're all seeing that little AI thing popping up in our Zoom calls that says notes are being taken here. That's a bit concerning, actually, but this point is that when you have those transcriptions and then you think about how they can be augmented and supported with other kinds of tools, that's intriguing. And then the chatbots, new opportunities for intelligent tutoring. And he gives this example of Mathos, so I'm going to share the example that he provided. And it's here. He asked it, what is a second countable set? And it gave back a definition, but the definition is broken down. So if you don't know what a topological space is, then here's the definition of topological space. base for a topology, so forth and so on. He showed it as an illustration of what can be made readily available with almost no time, almost instantly, for students. So it leads again to ideas about new materials for learning, new curricula, new ways of thinking about how to help a learner. And then he also talks about this hybrid idea, this co-pilot idea with an AI research assistant, but he's thinking as a mathematics education researcher, what would your research assistant need to look like to do work well for you? Would they be able to do great literature reviews that you could count on? And would they be able to help with data analysis and so forth? And then he also talked about using AI for some of the more, I think he put mundane tasks of doing research, helping with the IRB applications, helping with a number of kinds of reporting requirements. And so a time saver, as we saw a little bit in the mathematics side as well. He has a paper that he gave at PME North America, and in that paper with his colleague at UMaine, Izzy Bayert, he laid out a research agenda for mathematics education research. Okay, so I talked in the beginning about mathematics and what we can see a little bit about how AI is changing and driving what happens in mathematics. And here we have a different kind of research agenda for those who study the teaching and learning of mathematics. What are the questions that might be important to study? How are these tools being used effectively? How can they support student outcomes, student learning? I found a couple of studies that actually looked at normative teaching practice in certain settings, which in these settings that were explored included active learning and a lot of experiential learning in different fields. And then when AI is added in, the questions in the research were about how does it work? Does it make even better results or what? And basically it does help improve outcomes in learning. Not so clear it helps improve engagement or collaboration the way things are built right now. It can reinforce, I think, individual work and isolation a little bit. But in any case, Justin and his team are saying, you know, we start now to need to have a research agenda about mathematics learning that includes an AI focus. How does it connect with motivation? A very important question. Or how to foster a love for mathematics. Intriguing questions. All of those will require some new designs of new tools, perhaps. And then how can they promote equity and reduce disparities? Always a concern. If access to these tools is not equitable, then it's very difficult to imagine their overall improvement of mathematics. So math educators thinking in these ways as well. And then at a football game, I ran into a business professor who talked to me about what he's doing, and I thought, well, it's not mathematics, but it's kind of close, so we'll talk about his work here too. Pank Agrawal in our business school, he teaches Finance 350. And he himself, on his own, designed some kind of an AI chatbot, and I don't know about the exact tools that he used and so forth, but basically it's the same co-pilot idea. He said, I need to not be answering emails from students all night long, every day, 24/7. What time is the exam? I forgot what room the exam is in. How do I find the assignment that you gave out last week? Where do I look online? And so he's made these bots that not only answer all of those sort of operational questions, but that will answer content-specific questions in the course as well. And I fear he has now added me and this talk to this bot, and I haven't quite dared to go in and look, but when I asked him about it, he said, yeah, here's how we can do this, and I didn't have time, but anyway. He claims that these are increasing engagement, and the students are asking both heavy content and class admin type questions 24/7 with this bot. Now, we don't really probably have a comprehensive study going on of improved student learning in this class, but the part about getting rid of the admin type questions, we're seeing that in other bots, I'm sure, as well, that are being used for a variety of purposes in universities. But this was a professor who got interested, who taught himself what he needed to know, and is finding it's changing his teaching. And he quotes Saul Khan and says, I've got an expert personal course assistant here. And so now he's getting asked to give talks around the campus to share what he's up to. I talked to Natasha Spear, some of you would know Natasha, mathematics educator at UMaine, about the math department's use of GradeScope, which is another AI-based tool for grading. And if you've got a large calculus section and you imagine you give your exam, and this tool can sort all the problem 1 solutions into one pile and problem 2 into another, and so on and so forth. And it does all the things you would expect in terms of analysis, in terms of feedback to the students, and so forth. But Natasha pulled out this focus on the statistics of the exam. So if the exam had 9 questions, you see on the right the graph that shows how many students got the question, what percentage of the students got the question correct, I guess, is what's showing here. So there's obviously something happening with question 5, and maybe with question 4. And so an instructor who's concerned about what might be going wrong would take a look at those questions. You would know that if you had done hand grading of all of those exams, maybe. But you probably wouldn't have created all of this sorting and probably much more analysis that could show you some of the sample incorrect solutions to number 5, could help you understand what went wrong there. But what Natasha said, and those of you who know her know that she works in TA development, the preparation of TAs to improve their teaching of undergraduate mathematics. She said all of that sort of information can help instructors, especially novices, develop knowledge of student thinking, knowledge about assessment design, etc. She immediately saw this as a professional development tool for, perhaps for TAs who are learning to teach. How do you start to get a glimpse into student thinking in some kind of a convenient way that doesn't take forever? And she even argues that maybe they can learn about pedagogical content knowledge this way. So for the math educators in the room, again, the tools offer potential for how things can be improved, all with an eye toward the learner outcomes. And with potential for freeing up time that enables other kinds of goals in the mathematics classroom to be amplified in ways that maybe they haven't been so far. So then the second piece of the argument that I wanted to make, AI is changing the way mathematics is learned and taught. Here's a little bit of summary of that. High impact teaching practice, which we talk a lot about in education. We have lots of examples and lots of research to show the impact of that kind of practice on student learning. Now, what does that look like in the AI context? It's a very lively discussion, I think, to be had in mathematics education, math learning contexts. What is hybrid teaching? And how on earth do you help a teacher learn to prepare to be a hybrid teacher? Because that will become a question for mathematics teacher preparation, perhaps. The personalized interactive textbooks, we've touched on that a few times. That still is a potential curricular kind of innovation, again, with the potential for gathering data about student use of those tools. Newly now renovated in a sense where there could be massive data sets collected once those tools are out, and then researchers can look in lots of different ways. It probably will change how IRB works, it probably already is, in terms of where data comes from and what permissions are needed. Engagement and group problem solving, I go back to Tao's notion that you can work with a whole bunch of people that you don't trust. You know, I'm not sure that I would use that language in a K-12 setting, but you can work with people who definitely have different expertise, bring different strength to the problem-solving situation, particularly if the tools are designed for the person who's the good synthesizer, who can look across everything and see what might be there, or the person who knows this one very particular area really well, which you might know from their work in Conmigo or their work in MathScope. You know, these tools probably can be interconnected. Then how can you create, or have the tools help you create, group tasks for learners, really at any level, that will be customized in a way that enable this specific expertise to come in? How do you choose the prompts? My friend Ryan, my colleague, wrote a beautiful prompt, and I'll learn from that, but there isn't a real textbook yet on how do you make the best prompts for these tools that will get you what you need. How do you make sense of the results? The adaptive assessment, again, intriguing. You can change the test as you go, and many of you are familiar with this concept, but you can adapt the test to hit the level where you know the student is able to succeed or just not quite able to succeed, to find out where intervention might be needed, so it can be a supportive learning tool. Instructors can learn, as Natasha points out. You can do real-time adjustment in a classroom, although that would be very difficult to manage and to imagine right now because of all the input that would come in. But could the tools be developed as real, in the classroom kinds of co-pilots? Much more accessible to learners with diverse learning needs because it will be possible to customize, and then all of the research questions that it provokes. And so I think in both cases, in the learning and doing of mathematics and the teaching of mathematics, in the actual construction of new mathematics, this tool is here to stay, is my sort of humble prediction, and how we use it and what we make of it is to be determined by the level of energy and interest we muster collectively as a community to stay connected. So the last piece of the talk, how can university leaders understand this rapidly changing new environment and make good decisions about how to support their faculty and their students? So this will be a little more of a, if we have some chairs in the room or graduate program leaders or deans or others, these are things that I think we can be thinking about, and I'm going to make my pitch again. The mathematics community is really well positioned to take leadership in some of this because our field is so close to so much of what happens in AI. And because of the tools that have been developed, in particular, think about Conmigo, some of these are so K-12 mathematics focused that there's already a base to start from. So it's a little bit of a call to all of us, to all of you, to say, you know a lot about this, or you might want to get interested in it, and people in your university could benefit from what you could bring to the table. This is the only full slide that I pulled from the Gamma AI presentation that I ran. I took Ryan's report and gave a prompt to Gamma and asked it to make a PowerPoint, and it made this. One thing, all the people look exactly sort of the same. But the other thing is it customized it, because I said make a PowerPoint about the University of Maine, or that reflects the University of Maine. So they've got a poster in the back with UMaine written on it and pine trees, which I thought was a good gesture to try to like sort of recognize Maine. The colors aren't right. Nothing about it comes from any place other than AI. It's not connecting up to anything. But I thought that was amusing and interesting. And so they did point out in the slide that Gamma made off of Ryan's report that there will be big technology investments needed, perhaps. And that's, of course, part of why you have to be sure the administrators are following and understand what you might like to try to do, and the need for technical support. I'm less worried about that one. I think the AI will provide its own technical support, but we will see. So some areas of consideration that I'll just kind of run through from my own experience where I work and in what I do. First of all, everybody wants to know what the AI policy is. How many of you are in a university with an AI policy that you're aware of? There might be one that you're not aware of, too. And I'll share UMaine's in a minute. But our board of trustees is very interested. Like, what should the policy be for our whole system? Are we allowing this? Are we not? How are we? They're asking all the right questions, and they have leadership roles where this matters, and there could be considerable expense devoted to this, depending upon where the universities wish to go. So what are the guidelines? Where are the leaders and the experts? I was delighted to find quite a few, and that was without any kind of a call out to our whole university to try to find them. But there are people in your universities. Are they connecting? Are you connecting? How can you help your administrators answer the question? I just got a question last week. I need your 3 best AI people to come and be in a seminar session with Board of Trustees members and a committee that we're doing on AI. And I thought, I don't know who the 3 best are. I don't even know how to do that. So there is a need, at least in our place, and I'm sure it's expanding. Equity and fairness are serious issues and concerns. You can buy these the personal subscriptions, and so there's a have and have not concern right away with students who are able to afford to do that and those who are not. And so what the university makes available is really quite important. The costs need to be monitored carefully, and I go to talks and meetings and so forth where groups of presidents and leaders are speaking, and they all are saying, just watch this, be careful of signing up yet until we can understand exactly what these costs will be and how much can be done in-house. So that's evolving very rapidly. Choosing the tools that will fit best, not only where you are, but where you would like to be, and figuring out where those tools are going seems to be hard. IT folks in the universities are doing that, or being asked to do that. CIOs, CTOs, CISOs, the Chief Information Security Officers, they have to think about these issues as well. The training and support for everybody. Having pilot programs that maybe could be started out by a math department, something interesting they'd like to try. I at least, and some of my colleagues in my university, we love pilot programs because they don't sound like they're forever. They might not cost as much as something full-blown would cost, but you might learn something good that could scale up and spread. So those are important. The ethical issues I have mentioned, all kinds of issues about taking credit for work, making sure that there's actual crediting and citing. How do you handle that? All of that being worked through every place. Professional development of the faculty, communicating about what we do. The press asks regularly. So do you allow AI in your university? Those kinds of questions. Enterprise-wide opportunities. It's not just the math department that needs to be thinking about this. It's the whole university. And then, are we preparing our undergraduates for this changing job market? My statistic earlier, 70% of companies using some AI in at least one function. Are we educating students to be ready to work in that domain? Can the math department have a role? Here's UMaine's policy about AI, developed with our faculty senate, that we require clear statements in syllabi, and then we offer a number of options, all the way from requiring AI to very particular kinds of uses of AI. You know, I particularly like this one that says, use AI as a means of studying AI in order to understand its capacities, identify the data sets it uses, evaluate its algorithms, et cetera. So that's a challenge to students, perhaps, all the way down to forbid use of AI, which I thought was stern. And I, to be honest, don't know how you can do it. I mean, it's hard to even imagine. This is out there, it's ubiquitous. So that's what we have. I imagine this will change and be reshaped. This is the only other, I did use a second gamma slide because this was an interesting set of what might be in a pilot program. You might test some tools or evaluate the effectiveness of the program on student learning particularly, gather feedback, show savings, the kinds of things that would be appealing and helpful to understand should you go forward with this kind of idea. And at least many folks that I've talked to are a bit at a loss with what to do with all of this, so I think this concept of pilots might not be crazy. We have had at UMaine for some time something that we call UMaine AI. It's a virtual community of practice, I would call it, mostly researchers, but this is the vision is here and mission and so forth. They host regular webinars that are highly attended. This one is revolutionizing healthcare. So they choose a range of topics. The coordinator of this is an engineer, and it's multidisciplinary, and that's been very helpful as a focus for us as we go forward. This piece, a couple of years ago now, talks about other ways that AI matters in universities. The notion of finding the right students, strengthening retention, all of these areas that are important, adapting curriculum, things that presidents, or at least this president, thinks about, but we see them in the publications and so forth, are all of these topics that won't surprise you. A lot has to do with reputation and service to the state in a public university. How about using AI enterprise-wide? Can the math folks who are learning about this and being experts, can they help? So it's robust, it's big. Things that are valuable to your administrators, even chairs, I think. You have chairs in the room, I'm sure. We have chairs, but actually watching students use this would be very interesting and helpful. And I think important, understanding the faculty concerns, thinking about pitches for alums and donors. They're going to get interested very rapidly. And is my university doing something innovative here? Stories of success, big ideas. So there's a lot to think about at all different layers of the university. I'll conclude with saying a little bit about TPSE Math, and Dave Kung is here. And so I will just point out that TPSE, Transforming Post-Secondary Education in Mathematics, is always interested in helping the research mathematics community grapple with hard questions. How can AI help teachers? Many of the things we've talked about. How can AI help students learn better? And what about the rise of data and AI? Does that change the math we're teaching? I'll ask Dave to raise his hand so that he can answer any questions you have about that. Thank you, Dave. And then a bold vision that's being developed with TPSE and others. It's about getting clear that we want every higher education student to succeed in introductory mathematics that is aligned with their interests and aspirations. And so a new project coming, and here's the link if you'd like to connect to Project Ember, which is about eliminating mathematics barriers through evidence-based reforms, and I have no doubt that AI will enter this scene if it hasn't already, and be a part of this set of conversations across this network, so I certainly point you in that direction. We will post this slide also at this, you can get the URL from this QR code shortly after this talk is over. So with that, I think it's time for questions or comments or ideas, and I look forward to learning from you all. Thank you very much for being such an attentive audience.